Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Revolution Recap. We have another debate-style show here for you today. I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today is my counterpart, Seth Macomber of the Bent Muffet. How are you doing, Seth?
Excellent. I appreciate the throwback to episode 1, which I assume a lot of people listen to. Once again, it's a Bent Musket, although the Bent Muffin is getting closer and closer to opening every single day.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to start a GoFundMe, get that brunch space popping. Applebee's is the restaurant of yesterday. The future is the Bent Muffet. But we have another debate here for you today, and this is kind of a new style, Seth. You and I have been talking about this for a little bit, where we kind of separate from our normal weekend post-game shows. We kind of take a little bit of extra time and we go into the bigger questions. Each of us take a side, not necessarily the side that we believe with, that are our actual opinions, but we kind of take a side, kind of lawyer up, and kind of debate the hell out of it. So first, I think we want to talk about a very topical question with Matt Turner leaving for Arsenal, which is, who is the greatest goalkeeper in Revolution history? Seth, a few weeks ago, you kind of asked this question out on Twitter and got some very interesting responses. So I think we kind of want to go into that, just kind of debate who's the greatest goalkeeper in Revolution history. And before we begin, I want to take a minute and let you guys know that this episode is sponsored by Golasso Kits. Be sure to check them out at GolassoKits.com and save 15% off your order by using promo code RevsRecap. Over 200 new items were added just last week to the stores, so make sure you check that out. And this show is also brought to you by our friends at The Rebellion. Go check out anyrebellion.org for more information on how you can become involved or become a member. And of course, make sure you follow us at Revolution Recap on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Please also subscribe and rate us 5 stars if you haven't already. And make sure you follow Seth and the Bent Musket, not the Bent Muffet, the Bent Musket, at the Bent Musket on Twitter, and www.thebentmusket.com for year-round coverage. And you can follow Seth at SethMan31 on Twitter. And also, if you like this style of podcast and have an idea for a future debate, or if you just want to tell us who won, reach out to us on social media, or you can email us at revolutionrecap@gmail.com. Seth, you are the guest here. I will give you first dibs. Who is the greatest goalkeeper in Revolution history?
So I think it's a pretty tough competition. Obviously, we have Matt Turner, who's just transferred to Arsenal. But the other big name, in my opinion, and the one that I am going to name, is Matt Reis. Matt Reis spent 11 seasons with the New England Revolution between 2003 and 2013. He's a 4-time MLS All-Star, a 4-time finalist for Goalkeeper of the Year. He won the U.S. Open Cup with the team, as well as the North American Superliga. Shout out to Jake Catanese in 2008. 2007 was when he won the U.S. Open Cup. Statistically, he is a very, very good shot stopper. Between 2005 and 2009, he had double-figure wins for 5 straight seasons, including 44 shutouts. He had 10 shutouts in 2005, 2006, and 2007. Some amazing stats in terms of save percentages. You look at 78% in 2013, 83% in 2009, and 80% in 2006. He is someone who is a great personality off the field. I always remember talking to him. One of my favorite interviews with him was when I wanted to ask him about Clint Dempsey. And I said, how much has Clint Dempsey grown since he's gone over to Europe? And in a very Matt Reis type of way, very stoic way, he says, well, I don't think he's gotten any taller. I really didn't know how to respond to that because it was an early conversation I had with Matt Reis, but it really set the tone that he is a friendly individual, that he's a good spokesperson for the team, and he is someone that can get everyone's attention both on and off the field.
Well, I certainly think if we're debating who's the greatest prankster of all time, I think the argument definitely is Matt Reis. But if we're talking about the greatest goalkeeper in team history, my vote goes to Matt Turner. Matt Reis probably has a lot of the longevity arguments. He has a lot of the cumulative stat team records. But if you're looking at peak performance, that goes to Matt Turner, in my opinion. Sold Arsenal $7 million fee, one of the highest fees in club history. He won the Gold Cup as a starter with the United States men's national team. Could be the World Cup starter later this fall. He won MLS Goalkeeper of the Year, which Matt Reis was nominated for, but he never won. And, Matt Turner certainly had, I believe, 4.5 seasons with the Revs. Started in 2018, so he played the 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 seasons, and then part of the 2022 season. He's being sold at 28, which is in his prime, so he could have easily surpassed Matt Reis's records if he had the amount of time he was with the club as Matt Reis. But a higher league came calling, and that just kind of went out the window. If you look at stats, Matt Reis, goals against average, narrowly beats Matt Turner, 1.31. Matt Turner's at 1.33. Save percentage, Reis is at 72.3 and Turner's at 71.5. But as I say, Matt Turner is entering the prime of his career, so he probably would have surpassed those stats if he had 2 or 3 more seasons with the Revolution. And we don't have significant data in terms of expected goals for Matt Reis, but if you look at expected goals through American Soccer Analysis, Matt Turner has negative 26.04 since his time as a starter since 2018. Their data goes back to 2013. The next best is Nick Raimondo at minus 19.69, and then Steve Clark with minus 17.57. So in terms of cumulative expected goals allowed, Matt Turner is arguably the best goalkeeper in MLS over the past decade. So I think Matt Turner's peaks just massively surpass Matt Reis's peak. And I think all things considered, in terms of peak performance, you have to give best goalkeeper of the year to Matt Turner.
Massively surpass is pretty interesting when you listed a bunch of categories where Matt Reis is better overall, right? I mean, Matt Reis statistically leads the Revolution in most goalkeeping categories. And some people might say, well, he had a really good back line. Not always, right? In 2009, when he had an 83% save percentage there, he had Osei, Jay Heaps, Tierney, Albright as his back line, not necessarily the strongest back line in Revolution history. So I think that people give too much credence to the back line and the people in front of him and don't really understand that Matt Reis was an amazing shot stopper. He kept the ball out of the back of the net. Not only that, but he was amazing at taking penalties, which is something that we never saw in terms of Matt Turner. And I think it should be credited that when there was big moments and he had to stand in the goal and save penalties, he not only did that, but was willing to step up and take penalties in tournaments to show off his ability there. In my opinion, the biggest argument, I think it is really close when you look at Matt Turner versus Reis, and that's me being totally honest. In my opinion, what gives Reis the edge is that longevity factor. If Matt Turner was here for longer, then he probably would have surpassed Matt Reis in a lot of categories and would be viewed as the best Revolution goalkeeper in club history. But Matt Reis was there longer. And as a result, he deserves to get more credit and more recognition. He deserves to be on that pedestal. In the same way, I don't view Carlos Gil as the greatest Revolution player ever. He probably is the technical. He's probably the best. And over a few more seasons, he might get that title. But I think you have to be here for 5-6 years at least in order to try to get that position on the mantle or that position in the folklore of club history. And Matt Turner was there. I mean, 11 seasons. Not many people can say that they've been at a club for 11 seasons.
Well, I think you're overestimating he had a weak back line argument. Certainly there were some very, very good defenders. If you look at Matt Reis's peak, about probably that 2005 season to 2007 season, they had Michael Parkhurst on the back line, and he was a quality defender as well. Jay Heaps, an all-time great defender as well. So there were some great pieces along that back line, and it's not like Matt Turner didn't have some weak links over his time with the Revolution. Michael Mancienne, Tony De La Mea had some hiccups from time to time. That Brad Friedel defensive scheme was not amazing when he came into the league in 2008. That certainly didn't do him many favors. So I certainly think that Matt Turner... I'm getting confused between the Matts here. I certainly think Matt Turner also had some weaker defensive components too, and that expected goals stat also kind of speaks to the fact that he got his number called a lot, and he came up big. This defense is not nearly as good as the basic stats show, and there should have been a lot more goals allowed if an average MLS goalkeeper was in net. So I certainly think Matt Turner had a weaker defense than Matt Reis over his time with the Revolution. Certainly there were some years where Matt Reis had a weak defense, but in those prime years when Matt Reis was earning accolades, he had a very, very strong defense behind him as well. The only other thing too I want to add here too, if we're giving credit for Matt Reis and his penalty kicks and kind of adding a little bit to the offense, I think we also have to point out the time that Matt Reis had that awful free kick where he booted the ball through the uprights. We all know that one. I think it was DC United. He waved off everyone. I think he waved off Lee Win and then absolutely shanked a free kick over the bar. So if we're gonna bring up free kicks and goal kicks, which I know I don't have much of an argument there for Matt Turner, but Matt Reis certainly had some poor free kicks as well that have made the blooper reels.
Listen, I love a goalkeeper with self-confidence. And if he's willing to wave off Lee Win because he believed he had something going on there, hey, I'm willing to take that on. So good for Matt Reis, even though it went way beyond the goal. good for Matt Reis for stepping up in that moment and having confidence while chewing his gum and confidently walking towards that ball. I agree with you. That was a pretty bad moment, but you got to admit that he's pretty amazing when it comes to his ability to put the ball in the back of the net from the PK spot. I think I also want to recognize that Matt Turner had a lot of saves. A lot of this information was also parroted by Sean Donahue, so I want to make sure your co-host gets recognition here. But if you look at how many saves he does in a given season, 2011, 111 saves. 2009, 114 saves. 2007, 120 saves. 2006, 141 saves. So I want to make sure we recognize that Matt Reis wasn't just standing in the goal doing nothing, earning shutout after shutout. Like, he had to consistently make saves. And I think it's a little bit of a shame that we don't have the expected goals statistic for Matt Reis, because I think that would be telling. It's really important to recognize that Matt Reis was called upon regularly, even if he had good defenders in front of him. And when he did, he was consistently up for the task.
Yeah, I wish we had expected goals too, because I think that would be a stat that would strengthen my argument, but alas, we don't have that information here. I'm also going to say one more thing too while I'm bringing up age. As I say, Matt Turner is 28 being sold to Arsenal. If you look at Matt Reis's peak, it was 2005, I would say, to about 2008, 2007, 2008. He was 30 to 32, so as I say, Matt Turner is just entering his prime. He's done all this before Matt Reis was even an impact player with the Revolution. So Matt Turner could have had a long, successful career with the Revolution. It's just a higher league came calling. So I think if you had the 9 seasons of Turner as opposed and to compare with 9 seasons of Reis, Matt Turner is going to blow Matt Reis out of the water in terms of wins, in terms of accomplishments. He won a supporter shield. I know Matt Reis, you mentioned his accomplishments as well during the Revolution's best years as well. But I think Matt Turner, if you gave him a full 9 years, a full decade with the team, I think he would have easily surpassed Matt Reis's records. And it's worth noting, I know that win percentage is a team stat, but Matt Turner's win percentage, .589, so 58.9%. Matt Reis's win percentage, 51.0%. So, and Matt Turner, when he took over, the team was a lot worse than the Revolution were in the early to mid 2000s. So I think Matt Turner really was a building block to turning the team around. And I just think Matt Turner was a more successful player at a higher level than Matt Reis ever was.
In my opinion, though, it comes down what you do for the Revolution. Like, I think it's great that Matt Turner moved on. I think that you could probably even say that it was great because it brought that big transfer fee that the Revolution was able to reinvest into the team. But Matt Reis did more for this team in a jersey. Like, he won the U.S. Open Cup. He won the Superliga. He got to multiple MLS Cup finals. He was runner-up in 2005, 2006, and 2007. Even his final game, I remember in 2013 when he was playing, he had to beat out Bobby Shuttleworth to become the starting goalkeeper again. And in the final stretch into the playoffs, he was absolutely amazing. At one point in 2013, at the later years of his career, he was 7-0-4 and had a goals against average of .72 during a stretch. Not over the entire season, but during that one stretch is pretty remarkable to think about an aging goalkeeper putting in that type of ability. And we all know that goalkeepers obviously get better as they go on. But when Matt Reis is on the edge, I can't wait for you guys to listen to this and catch how many times we said the wrong name. But when Matt Reis is at the end of his career, he's still putting up amazing stats. And he may have even played one more season if it wasn't for the injury that he sustained. And who knows? I mean, you sound like you're playing a little bit of this what if game of like, oh, what if Matt Turner was here longer? He probably would have, surpassed things like that. If Matt Reis was healthy in 2014, maybe that's when he makes the World Cup. I mean, we can play what if all we want.
As I say, if you're looking at the ability, Matt Turner, no question, is the answer in my mind. I also want to point out one other stat here too while we're looking at advanced analytics, which unfortunately we don't have for Matt Reis because that would have benefited my argument as well. But if you look at goals to expected goals, Matt Turner is 0.83. Going back to 2013, he's the only player in MLS under 0.90 goals to expected goals. So that basically means that if you're at 0.90, that means that you're basically saving 1 out of every 10 goals. I think I'm doing the math right there. But as I say, Turner's at 0.83. Next behind that, Dwayne St. Clair at 0.90. Nick Ramondo's at 0.92. Only player with more than 2,000 minutes under 0.90. So that's another pretty kind of crazy stat that just shows Matt Turner's dominance. And as I say, he won goalkeeper of the year, MLS goalkeeper of the year. Matt Reis never did it. He probably should have won it twice. I think he should have won it over Andre Blake in 2020, but unfortunately the voters felt otherwise. So Seth, I think I've run out of arguments. I think I've dominated this conversation pretty overwhelmingly. Do you have any final thoughts, any conclusion, any closing statement from you on Matt Reis, or any other stats you want to throw out before we depart here?
I mean, I just look at the goals against average for the Revs, and Reis is at 1.31 and Turner is at 1.33. I mean, that seems pretty clear to me which one's the superior
That's pretty
goalkeeper.
That's kind of a draw, though. That's not dominant.
No. One's clearly lower than the other, correct?
By 0.2.
Listen, I'm not a big math guy, but 1.31 seems lower than 1.33. Am I correct?
Well, you're the teacher here, so I would have to give that to you. But I do just want to say, if we were looking at careers up until the age 28 season, Matt Reis has 5 starts with the Revolution and 460 minutes played, and 0 clean sheets. That's his Revolution career at age 28. So all of Matt Reis's great years came after his age 28 season, which is where Matt Turner is right now. So I think it's undisputable that Matt Turner, he's already above. If you take Turner's peak and you take Matt Reis's peak, I think Turner's peak is better, and he was probably just going to get better. He's probably just going to enter that prime 28, 29, or 20, 28, 29, 30, 31. I think if he had those years, and if we're talking about Matt Turner getting another 4 years to match Matt Reis's term, I just think it blows it out of the water. And the goals against average, the 1.31 to 1.33, I think Matt Turner absolutely would have surpassed that as the team, right? If he was able to ride out the Revolution's stronger years, which it seems like we're still in the midst of that, I think that goals against average would go down.
I just look forward to hearing people on Twitter comment and say that your what if comments versus my cold hard statistics. I think it's be pretty clear that they're going to side with me and believe that Matt Reis is the greatest goalkeeper in Revolution history.
Mm-hmm. It's not really what ifs. It's just kind of more of an assumed conclusion, because Matt Turner's Revolution career is getting short. Like his peak is already better than Matt Reis's peak. That's my central theme here. I think that's worth pointing out. And Matt Turner also, by the way, it's worth pointing out, he missed a lot of games because he was with the United States men's national team. Matt Reis didn't really have many games that he missed because he only had 2 caps with the men's national team. So I think it's kind of just also worth pointing out there that Matt Turner's cumulative stats would have been a little bit closer if he wasn't on national team duty, serving his country.
Shout out to Matt Reis for putting club over country. Obviously, Revolution through and through. Really want to make sure that the Revolution are always doing their best week out and week out, because we all know that Matt Reis is obviously a quality goalkeeper who could have represented his national team more.
Well, I'll let you get the final word here, Seth. That wraps us up. Who won this debate? Let us know on our Revolution Recap Facebook page, our Instagram page, or on Twitter. You could DM us, or you can comment on the post, or you can also email us at revolutionrecap@gmail.com. Please help us determine who won this debate. And if you have any suggestions for future debate ideas that you'd like to hear me and Seth argue back and forth, please let us know at Revolution Recap on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and then revolutionrecap@gmail.com. Please also be sure to support our podcast by subscribing and reviewing us wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support us further, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/revolutionrecap. And be sure to support our friends at Galasso Kits at galassokits.com. Remember to save 15% off with promo code RevsRecap, and our friends at The Rebellion, NERebellion.org. And also be sure to follow The Bent Musket at The Bent Musket on Twitter and www.thebentmusket.com, and follow Seth at SethMan31 on Twitter. Thank you everyone for listening. Please let us know who won. What do you think, Matt Turner or Matt Reis? Let us know, and thank you for listening, and go Revs.